What's up, geeks? So I'm going all iPad Pro workflow, and I'm going to take you guys through the entire journey from peripherals and things like that to performance, etc. And I want you to know that as somebody who runs 2 YouTube channels, a record label, and I'm a student, I don't take this decision lightly. I need a device that can really be there for me the whole time. So I'm going to explain it in this video why I chose the iPad Pro over the MacBook Pro. So before we get started, be sure to hit the subscribe button and click the bell so you don't miss. I'm Chris Grant Jr. It's the Granted Geek Show. Okay, so first, some ground rules. As a pro, I know that I don't have time for things not to work, right? It needs to work perfectly every time or very close to every single time. I don't have time for different workarounds and learning different apps and workflows in order to get things to just work the way they should. And Apple has a really decent track record when it comes to their devices just working. So I'm not worried about that. And also, I've used the iPad Pro before as my only device. And so I'm not exactly a beginner here, but now with the M1, I think that this is really going to take it to the next level when it comes to professional work. So let's put aside some of the things that we already know are common between the new iPad Pro M1 and the MacBook Pros. Number one being the M series chip, the M1 in particular. Number two being the RAM. The new base model iPad Pro comes with 8 gigabytes of RAM and goes all the way up to 16. And yes, there are some variants of the MacBook Pro that go even higher than that, but you can get some decent work done with 8 and 16, really 16 gigs of RAM, especially with the optimizations that come in iOS. Remember, Mac OS has been around for a long time. It's a pretty efficient system, but there's some bloat that gets thrown around where iOS in general and iPad OS is just a very clean operating system. There's not a lot of room, especially with the new security features they're putting in. There's not a lot of room for things to be going on in the background. And this is obviously showcased by the amazing ability of iOS devices to manage such great tasks on so little RAM. And then also, obviously, Thunderbolt is something that's now common between the iPad Pro and the MacBook Pro. Yes, you're only getting one port, but there's so many dongles and docks. I've got a really interesting setup coming, so you want to stick around for that. But now that we've gotten those things out of the way, let's talk about some of the differences, and these being the reason that I chose the iPad Pro over the MacBook Pro. Okay, so let's start off with form factor and versatility. And you're going to have a hard time arguing that the iPad Pro is not the more versatile device. I mean, the MacBook Pro at any given time is either a MacBook, like a laptop, or it's docked as a desktop, and that's all fine and well. The iPad Pro, and really any iPad, is at any given point either a tablet, it can be used in a case as a laptop, or it can be docked as a desktop with an external display, USB-C hub, chargers, all those kinds of things. It just gives me more versatility. If I'm in the car, sometimes you don't, or on a plane, you don't have enough room for a full laptop setup. You just want to get at something quickly. So when it comes to the iPad, it's the more versatile device. Now, next up is the input method, which the MacBook just straight up lacks, and that is touch. Now, you can already use peripherals right now, keyboard and mouse, with the iPad Pro, but you can also use touch. And I want to spend a little time on this because I don't think people really realize how incredible touch can be if implemented correctly. With these chips getting faster and faster, eventually you end up, and I'm not going to get too much into the weeds, but on the iPad Pro in the workflow, you're touching what you see, you're dragging it, and really things are moving as fast as your hands can move and the processor can process what you're trying to do. When you have a MacBook situation, it is the time that you're thinking about things to when you can move the mouse over to that portion of the screen, and you certainly can move your hand quicker than you can move a cursor, and then the amount of time the processor takes to process that. And I know that gets into the weeds and you're really like chopping up milliseconds at this point, but in theory, when these chips get almost as fast as you can think, it's just going to be a faster experience with touch than it will be with keyboard and mouse, as you have to interact with those in order to interact with the content. But with the iPad and touch, you're interacting directly with the content. And so that makes it amazing for things like editing thumbnails, any kind of visual work, because you're literally zooming and drawing with your fingers or a stylus. And it's an incredible input method that I really don't think gets enough credit. Okay, and number 3, which is pretty important for me as a video creator, are the cameras. So these cameras are miles better than what you get on the MacBook Pro. And of course, you're not going to be shooting any high-end video on these, but you're talking about the 12 megapixel wide camera front facing, which is going to be great for FaceTiming, Zoom, any kind of video conferencing, or even maybe live streaming. It's going to look better than the MacBook Pro. And then on the back, you've got your wide and ultra wide cameras at 10 and 12 megapixels as well. So the cameras are just going to be great. And in a pinch, it's great to be able to record a live stream or even a quick video and have it already on your hard drive, because it's saved right to the hard drive. You can get right into the edit. So the cameras is a no-brainer. But then I want to move on to iOS, right? And so this is obviously debatable, and I'm not too dogmatic on it, as I've used and mastered both macOS and iOS, but I just love the way that iOS works. It's so intuitive. I think designing for touch naturally makes things more, for lack of a better word, natural. Things work the way you think they work. And that's something that's true of macOS as well, but just the input device of mouse and keyboard, I think, is getting kind of old. And even if you want to keep those around, touch is definitely here to stay. And so it's been since 2007 with the iPhone, and even before that, but it's something that definitely should be implemented on the MacBook Pro. But that's fine, because they have it on the iPad Pro now, so I'm more than happy to use that. But overall, I honestly think iOS is a better platform, and the only thing really holding it back are the professional apps, the pro apps that I do believe will be coming at WWDC 2021. And when that happens, the ecosystem's going to be there, especially because the iPad has the Mac beat when it comes to games. And I know that now you can run iOS games on the Mac as well, but when you think of a portable gaming system that you can just take anywhere, it's just a screen, you prop it up, you got your game controller or whatever, or you can even touch interact with it. It's just a better overall gaming experience for me personally. And now with the M1 chip, man, hopefully it'll be able to run even better games once they're optimized for M1. And maybe they won't be AAA games, but still far beyond anything we've seen on iOS before. So that kind of neatly segues into the biggest issue, which is software. And we are expecting WWDC 2021 to be amazing and to completely unlock the potential of the iPad Pro, especially with M1 offering pro applications, maybe a better file system, new interface in some way that would be better for touch as well as keyboard and mouse. So there's a whole lot of things that could happen and that I think are going to happen. If you want to hear me talk more about that in particular, I did make a video called Apple's Secret Plan, and I know a lot of our subscribers come from that video, but if you haven't seen it yet, I'll leave a link down below or a link somewhere here on the screen. But I think that iOS just has so much going for it, and if they can get the pro apps on there, it is going to be the go-to. But in general, and leave a comment if you agree, I feel like there's a reluctance in the tech community to acknowledge that the iPad could ever be a pro machine. So you have a lot of pros with their workflows and their high-end gear, and they say, I could never use iPad. But now that the same chip is in there, some of the same I/O is in there, it uses peripherals like a keyboard and mouse, you're really just talking about operating system. And if the apps begin to work and look the same, you're just adding the ability to input via touch. So I don't understand the reluctance to acknowledge that the iPad Pro is definitely going to be a competitor as soon as WWDC 2021. So yeah, guys, those were the reasons that I chose to go with the iPad Pro over the MacBook Pro. And if you agree, be sure to hit the like button and show some support in the comments below. This is definitely a rare movement of iPad only people, and I'll be trying it out. I think it's going to work pretty well. So thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I got a ton of other videos on the iPad Pro and the Apple event and all those kind of things, and WWDC. All that stuff is down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I'm Chris Grant Jr. It's the Granite Geek Show.